David, thanks so much for taking some time to chat about this. Obviously, big news out of Michigan right now with Gretchen Whitmer following through on her pledge when she was running for re-election to repeal right to work legislation in Michigan. Now it's the first state in 58 years to buck the trend of, I guess this ongoing assault on union rights. I'm 34 years old. So this started, in the early 80s, late 70s, the trend of trying to de-establish the unions,
Right.
establishing the freeloader clause that would allow for anyone to be a part of it. Have you heard anything about it on our side of the border here? I imagine this has to be big news in the union sphere.
Well, you would think it would be, um, but I haven't heard anything. I mean, I think you and I are the only two that are actually talking about it. It's interesting because it's huge news when somebody repeals a bill like that, and now, I mean, back in the day, you and I could have been working next to each other. I'm paying union dues, you're not. We still have the same representation. I mean, it just the inequalities there, and nobody's talking about it. I'm just flabbergasted that we're not hearing anything about this right to work, because I guess maybe in Canada you don't have that choice. It's this fallacy that people think, well, I'm mad at my union, I'm not going to pay dues, I can put it to a charity. That's not true. When somebody's mad at me and they tell me they don't want to pay dues no more, I tell them to quit. I mean, that's reality.
Yeah.
I mean, so they don't have that choice here.
Well, I mean, 45 and the Ford strike and the Rand formula and the Supreme Court, hammering it out. I mean, we have different cases on both sides of the border, but at the end of the day, it's exactly what you just said. No longer is there going to be a non-union member represented in whether it be a contract dispute or a workplace dismissal or a penalty or something. Those were always union lawyers,
Yeah.
union employees. And I guess my question is there any way to look at it from the union perspective as, was there any merit to right to work from your perspective, or is it what I expect you to say? This was meant to bankrupt us.
This was meant to break unions. Make no mistake. And the reason that the right did it was just that simple fact. I mean, even this legislation that got passed, there's another piece of this legislation I think that's important. So any time that they have any procurement through a government contract, they need to use X amount of, apprentices, X amount of certain type of labor on those projects. And it was, I think they kind of coupled them both together, but it was not unanimous, as the numbers that came out of it. But the result in it was, I mean, people just tried to get away with having skilled labor, that they didn't have to pay for. There was just cheap labor, right? And I mean, I say it all the time. Cheap labor isn't skilled, and skilled labor isn't cheap. So I mean, the facts of the matter are there is nothing that good could come out of this. I mean, with the ultra right, as we call it, and what's going on, but they have a lot more issues, I think, over in the U.S. right now than this right to work legislation. But again, just interesting. Nobody's really talking about it.
Well, I find that to be so interesting because I remember I was much younger then, but when it went through under Governor Snyder, there was this conversation of we have to do this because we're experiencing a race to the bottom with wages. We have Ohio that's already gone that way. Illinois is discussing it. If we don't do this, everyone is just going to see a mass exodus. 20 years later, things have changed, and I think we're starting to see more of a correlation between higher wages and better standards of living and all the things that make perfect sense from what the union perspective would be. But it seems like that's translating a bit more into our general politics. Do you see a bit more of that, at least on our side of the border here?
Yeah, I do. I mean, even with union organizing, the way that the economy is, the cost of living, the employers can't pay what they wanted to so many times, and we see. I mean, it's interesting you're meeting with me today because I'm opening up. I'm upstairs doing some bargaining prep with a company that's been in Windsor, Tecumseh, for since 1986, TRQSS, and they have 600 members there that decided to join the union. For whatever reason, they've kept them out. They paid them the same wages, etc. But they haven't got a raise in 4.5 years. So they know that that's coming, obviously, and they know they joined the union was going to be good for us. And I mean, they look at it like, what's it worth? I mean, I'm worth more than this, and I should be making more. And my boss is making more. We're making more for the boss, so let's put that in. So this is some of the things that we see on these trends. But from a political standpoint, I think that back in the day, the right. So let's leave it at provincial politics at this time, not the federal side, but on the provincial side, when we look at the, people wanting to not join the union, et cetera, I see more and more of the shift going that even the conservative government wants to work with the labor movement. I mean, I have a relationship with the premier, I have a relationship with the labor minister. And the reason I do is because I don't play politics on any of that. I don't care what party you're from. If you're representing the people that I represent, then we're going to talk. We have to have this conversation. The conversation has to continue. Is there always that caution out here? Absolutely. I mean, but I mean, the way we are in what's going on in Ontario today, I think that everybody has the same opinion. As we just got to make sure that we're bringing work to Ontario, that we're bringing good jobs here. Look what's going on in Windsor right now.
Well, and I mean, we've got a pretty good outlook for the next 5-10 years with the big projects that we have. We don't need to list every single one of them. But we have seen a bit of labor strife from the provincial government, specifically when it came to QP education workers not too long ago. That was resolved, really woke up a beast that I think is the labor movement, not only in Ontario, but across the country. I guess what my question would be, is the fight ever over? I mean, you said at the outset, we have this established here. As you can say to your employees when they're upset about the dues, you can quit. Nothing's changing. On the broader scale, though, is there still the ability for these attacks like we saw with the Ford government to try to end run around using the notwithstanding clause? Can the union movement sort of rest on its laurels right now, or is it always a fight?
I don't think it's always a fight. I mean, the reality is he was given some, bad, guidance, we'll call it. I mean, we all have our people that we go to and ask for our advice, et cetera, how we should handle it. And he realized real fast that it was bad advice. I mean, I even called him myself. There was a lot of people who called behind the scenes to make sure who was putting a notwithstanding clause in there. I mean, and actually pulling these powers. I don't think that we're looking at things like that. And I said that at a provincial level. At the federal level, if this Pierre Poilievre gets in, I'm more concerned. He come from the days of Harper, career politician, very good orator. He can speak well, and people, resonate to him. But once you see and take a deep dive into him, people are smart enough to realize that he is really, really not the right person. And hopefully, Canadians see that. But he's the type that would put something like we had that Bill 377 that was in place, where we have to make sure that we're telling everybody what we do in the finance end of it. And then he would be one that would potentially put in the right to work legislation, things like that. And even around 377, if you really think about it, if you belong to a Legion, you get to see the books because you're a dues paying Legion member. If you belong to my union, you get to see our books because you're a dues paying member. Who the hell is the government to be able to say, I want to see your disclosure of what the books are? You don't pay dues to our organization. The membership here gets to tell us how and what we're going to spend on accordingly. So these are some of the things that potentially from a federal level I could see coming in if somebody like that makes her way in.
And then try to use that to weaponize those numbers against the union, try to say, look at these expenses. This
100%. 100%.
And then, I mean, the risk with that as well is you'd be having to disclose private contracts, so people's privacy and their involvement.
Sure.
And then competitiveness, that also becomes an issue. I could see how that would be an issue for the union for sure.
Yeah, there's so many downsides to this. I mean, the reality is where we're at right now, I don't think that there's, I think we're pretty harmonious. We've got our challenges. We still have our battles every day. I mean, politicians fight other politicians to get reelected. I wish we could all have, everybody love each other. And I don't think that's ever going to happen in our day, John. You're a little younger than me, but I don't think that we're ever going to see that. Imagine that if we could just have everybody trying to work together for the good of everybody. Imagine that concept.
I can't even imagine it in my head. Last question locally here, just to pull things back to the Michigan angle. Obviously, beginning of last year, everything got turned on its head with the convoy protests and with the shutting down of the Ambassador Bridge. I'm not asking you the hard question on tape, don't worry. I guess I just wondering, did we see, was there any positives that came out of that in terms of the response to it and an understanding of just how damn important our region is as the economic engine in North America?
Well, I've said it several times in the interviews I've been on lately. Even when I was speaking both from the federal budget and the provincial budget, last few weeks, I think that Canada now starts in Windsor. Everybody thought that this was the end, and I think it starts right at that Ambassador Bridge. Just look at what happened when that convoy was there. Nobody in charge of this shutdown, no real responsibility with anybody. They're making a point saying we're going to shut this down. All the trade that was missed, and it's very important. So I mean, I still believe that Canada starts in Windsor, and we're going to go up the 401 instead of coming down the 401. And I think that we did learn a lot from the convoy and what transpired there. One of the most divisive issues I've ever dealt with my entire tenure is over that whole vaccine, the whole issue around the mandates, everything. And I hope I'm never faced with something like that again. I mean, there's a few things that a labor leader tries to stay away from, the gun control, the religious things. And I'll tell you, this was higher than any of those issues that one would have to deal with.
Yeah, I remember watching all of the auto industry just sort of shut down along the 401 corridor, like the basketball with the
Yeah.
NBA when COVID first started. I want to thank you for your time right now. That covers everything.